And we'll talk about why in just a minute. Mark 5, beginning at verse 21. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the lake. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in to where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years old. And they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Last Sunday was Father's Day, and a picture was taken of my father, who will be 86 in a couple of weeks. And he was wearing a t-shirt that said, "0 days without a dad joke," which is quite accurate. He may be the master of dad jokes. He certainly is better at them than I am. In fact, Luke really doesn't like it when I tell dad jokes. He just kind of says, "Daddy, don't do that." But we laughed, you know. And one dad joke, which I'm sure he used, and certainly other dads have used, comes when a child has a minor injury, maybe a splinter in a finger or something. And they'll say, looks like we'll have to amputate. Luke wouldn't like that because he would think I really meant it, that we were going to be cutting off a finger or toe or something. But dads will use that, and it's got a couple of purposes, of course. One is to reassure the child that this really probably isn't that bad. We'll take care of it. But another, I think, even more important, is that the dads will tell that kind of joke to quiet their own anxiety. Because I think nothing is more fearful than to have a child sick, to have a child in pain, to have a child suffering. Right at that, of course, would be a child having someone be mean to them. Not only peers, but sometimes even grown-ups can be mean to our children. We had many meetings with special education personnel during Luke's time in school. And maintaining a non-anxious presence in the middle of that sometimes got difficult. And there was one meeting we had where we showed up on time, our advocates showed up on time, our consultant showed up on time, and we got there, and the director of special education said, "We're not ready." They were late to begin with, and then they said, "We're not ready. We'll have to reschedule this meeting." And the words out of my mouth were still appropriate for a preacher, but they were very angry. Disrespecting my child will get me going. Well, Jairus' child isn't disrespected, but she is sick. She is sick with a life-threatening illness that gets his attention, that is his worst fear. And he comes to Jesus. He is a leader of the synagogue. He's not called a rabbi. He's called the leader of the synagogue. He's the one who helps lead the laity in his church, in his synagogue. Maybe if there are disputes, people may bring the disputes to him because he's known to be wise, perhaps, and able to make good judgments. But he's not in charge of this situation. And he comes to Jesus and begs him for help for his little girl. We'll later find out she's 12. Almost a woman. Girls might have been given in marriage at age 13, but to him, she's still his little girl, and always will be. And he begs for help because he's not in charge. And on the way, something else happens. A woman we're told, has been sick for 12 years. Some kind of what we might call female trouble. And at least at the beginning of it, she had resources. Maybe it was an injury from childbirth. Maybe from a failed childbirth. But whatever it is, she's had this trouble for 12 years. And the King James said she had suffered long under many doctors. Some of you know what it's like to suffer long under many doctors. Going all the way back to Hippocrates, doctors have been advised to project confidence, that your patient's confidence that you know what you're doing is critical to the healing process. And so she has been to doctors who have projected confidence, but who were unable to help. And things have gotten worse. And I've got to think, in a village like that, everybody knows about it. They may not know the specifics, but they know she's got a problem. The other women in the village probably talk about her and say she's the one with the condition, they might say. And her ability to participate in the life of the community is limited. And she hears about Jesus being present and comes to find him, but she doesn't come behind him or come in front of him and beg like Jairus has. She just tries to reach around behind him and touch one of the fringes of his prayer shawl. And in a crowd where people are jostling all the time, something about that touch is different. And Jesus stops and asks, "Who touched me?" And I wonder, did he say, "Who touched me?" Or did he say, "Who touched me?" We don't know the tone, but we hope it's the latter. But the woman is still afraid. She has been trying to be anonymous, and now the whole village is going to know about her interaction with Jesus. And he gives her the same title that Jairus has given his daughter. She too is a daughter. This has been a time of begging. Just before this, Jesus has been in the country of the Gerasenes, and he's encountered a man with an unclean spirit. And the spirits beg Jesus not to send them away. And he sends them into a herd of pigs that then goes headlong into the sea. And the people beg Jesus to leave. And now Jesus is being begged to help Jairus' daughter. And word comes that it's too late. We don't hear it, but we wonder if Jairus might have said to himself, if only that woman had left Jesus alone, he'd have gotten there in time. But Jesus says, hang on. Story's not over yet. He arrives, and the mourners have already begun their mourning. If you've ever seen a funeral from the Middle East, you know how loudly the cries may be made. And he says, she's sleeping. And they laugh. Well, he could mean she's sleeping, she's taking a nap. Or sleeping may mean she's dead. Sleeping can be a way to say somebody's dead. And they laugh at him. They think he means she's taking a nap. So he sends them away and takes just his inner circle of disciples and Jairus' parents. And he tells her to get up. And she does. And she eats. Dead people don't eat. Ghosts don't eat. And we hear she's 12. One daughter has lived her life to age 12, but she's at the point of death. Another has had kind of a living death for 12 years. Both of them daughters, both of them included in what Jesus is doing. The worst thing that happened, the worst thing we'd feared, turned out not to be the last thing. He tells them to keep it quiet. And before, in the country of the Gerasenes, he told them to keep it quiet. And I've got to wonder, if a rabbi came and sent evil spirits into your pigs, and the pigs went into the Sea of Galilee, wouldn't you tell that story? You got to think, when people come to that village, somebody got to tell, you know what, let me tell you about the time the rabbi came and my pigs went over the cliff. It was right here. They got to be telling this story. They're going to be telling that story for years. And if you come to Jairus' village, they're going to be saying, do you know when the rabbi came? And his daughter was dead. And Jesus raised her up. She's over there right now with her children. They're going to be telling that story forever. But in Mark, Jesus tells them to keep it quiet. Because he does works of compassion. He frees people from death and disease, but that's not who he is. They won't know until the end who he is. It'll be at his death that who he is becomes clear. But they can tell the story. The worst thing turned out not to be the last thing. And now I can tell you that story.